Hey friends, welcome back. I'm Ashley from Uncommon Roots Homestead, and it's time for our third May garden tour. And we have something really exciting that just made its way into the garden. Let's do it. All right, so before we get into the garden tour, I have to show you what we've just gotten into the garden. Okay, so some of you may or may not know, I think I told you, but some of you may or may not know that for the last 6 weeks, we have been hand watering this garden from rain barrels. We have 2 rain barrels and probably like 4 or 6 watering cans, and that's how we've been watering our garden. And it takes about 2 hours start to finish to water that way. And unfortunately, that only works. Okay, so it took about 2 hours start to finish, and it's not ideal. This is a pretty large garden. We have about 650 square feet of garden space in the raised beds, and then somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 square foot in ground once it's finished. So it's not finished yet, but once it's finished. So that's a lot of space to hand water with watering pails. But because we're building our house, we just hadn't had water run here yet. But I was on a work trip this week, and I just got back, and I came home to a surprise. Why don't you show them, Isla? We have running water. This means so much to us. This means that we're in a drought right now. We've gone, I think we're like 3 weeks without water at this point, and everything is really thirsty. So what that means is that we're gonna be able to give this entire garden a really good water. Because the rain barrels have been empty, we've actually been hauling water from our house in the back of the truck and a bunch of trash cans here over to the land, filling the watering cans and then watering everything, which took even longer. So we're very excited. I'm gonna go ahead and hook the hoses up, and we're gonna start watering everything, and then I'll walk you through and show you what everything looks like. Okay, and she's gonna do that one. All right, so that took a little bit of time, but was so much quicker than the hand watering that we were doing before. It's still hand watering because we're using a hose, but and also I need a new hose. I am soaking wet. But it was way quicker than it was before, and that is such a blessing because I love spending time in the garden. But my favorite time in the garden is kind of just being. I think that's true for pretty much anyone. I don't know anybody who's like, ooh, I love to go work. But I obviously love to take care of my garden and to be in the garden. But whenever I can expedite some of those little tasks or chores, it just leaves more time for enjoying the space that we have. So with that being said, I want to walk you around the garden. Now it's perfect. The sun has started to set a little bit, so we shouldn't have that bright glare. So let's do it. I feel like I will forever be saying, here is my lovely trellis that is empty, but I'm seeing a little bit of new growth, I think, coming on these roses. So hopefully I see them really start to take off soon. They've kind of been like this for a while, but I'm going to water them good today. I actually didn't get around to watering the roses yet, but I'm going to give them some water. This is one of those white roses, and he should grow too. And then I've got the blueberries that are up here, and look at, they're so cute and little. I really should have popped the berries off of this year, but I didn't. And so that means we'll get to eat some blueberries. So I want to talk for a second about this sign. So this sign, my lovely friend Taylor made this for me. And so she has these all over her garden. She actually lives not that far from us. She's Joy in the Wilderness on Instagram, but she has these signs all over her garden. When I saw them, I was like, oh my gosh, Taylor, I love those. Can you make me one for the potager garden? And so she made this for me, and this wood was found on their property. All of it, like her dad put it together, she painted it. It's just gorgeous. So I feel like it's so special, and it's right here kind of framing the entry to the garden. I think it's so fun to have things like that from friends. Now I have a question for you all. Does anybody know what this giant asparagus looking thing is? I have them all across the front here. I haven't Googled it yet, so I'm sure Google can tell me. But if you know, drop it in the comments below. I think it's probably gonna bloom, right? It looks like that's gonna flower and bloom. Those were here from the last owner. So those are at the very beginning of the garden. And then I've got the blueberries that are all starting to look good. The roses that are just okay. But then as we come in, I got to show you my tomatoes. Look at this. So look at how much growth these tomatoes have seen in just a week. Like, this is crazy. These things, they're so tall. I really need to get out here and prune and then also tie them up. All right, so in my last video, I wasn't really sure how I was gonna tie up a lot of these tomatoes. I didn't have a plan before I planted them, which you should always have a plan before you plant. But I didn't really have a clear plan, so I didn't space them correctly to, like, you know, do a cattle panel or something like that. So what I was thinking, I had a couple people recommend the Florida weave, but what I saw, my friend Jill over at Whispering Willow Farm, she just posted a video on pruning tomatoes, so I'll link that below as well. But she has one of her tomato beds she actually did with T-posts and then a rod across the top, and then she just strung them up. Which seems like a great idea. It's kind of like the Florida weave, I guess, a little bit, except each tomato is individually tied up. And I think I might try that for one of these beds. For the 6x3 beds, I actually have some trellising that I might be able to use to kind of put in the middle and support them. But I really need to get out. I mean, these grew, I was gone for 2 days, and I feel like the garden just exploded. So you want to make sure that as your tomatoes start getting established, that you're not letting them go crazy. As easy as it is to do, because I mean, we all want to see that like huge growth, you want to start training them down. I trained mine down to 1 stem, and then I feel like you can just optimize your space a little bit. You can have them closer together and you still get a lot of fruit. So that's what I'm going to start doing. I have not pruned these tomatoes at all. I'll do a separate video on that later this week, but that's what I think I'm going to do in terms of tying these up, and I need to do that in the next couple of days before they start falling over. So one of the things that's interesting about tomatoes, and the reason you don't want them to start falling over, is that if you look at this, do you see all of these little hairs on this tomato? Those will all become roots. So if you let those, if you let a tomato just fall over onto the ground, it's gonna start setting roots everywhere that it touches the ground. And sure, it's going to have a really established root system, but those are going to be shallow roots. And then what's going to happen is that the bugs and the critters, they're all going to eat your fruit because it's going to be laying right on the ground. So that's why a lot of the times you want to tie tomatoes up and kind of train them to move upwards instead of laying down on the ground. All right, so my lettuce and beet bed and spinach is just thriving. We've had such a cool May. That usually these would all have gone to seed by now, but they're still really going strong. I actually need to come out tomorrow morning. I'll come out early and harvest most of the spinach. My beets are not quite ready yet. They're getting there. Let me see if I can show you. Let's see if we can find one that's kind of coming up. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. So you can see they're getting there, but they'll get a lot bigger than that. So I'm gonna let them keep going. My lettuce is just, I've already harvested this, 4 or 5 times. So I've got both of these rows of lettuce that are ready to be harvested again. These heads of lettuce that I let go to head are just looking beautiful. So I've started picking the outside leaves off of those to eat. You could harvest the entire thing, then it's just kind of one and done, or you can continue to peel the outer leaves off like this. Like I would take this and maybe this, and then it'll just grow new inner leaves, and then these become the outer leaves. So it gets you a little bit further. And then I've got more beets. These are golden beets. And then I've got this Merlot lettuce that is just beautiful. That's about ready to start being eaten on as well. All right, so I did last week, you guys joined me for the harvest of all of the onions. I did go ahead and get some red onions back in the ground in this bed. So it is not ideal to succession grow onions back to back in the same bed. Really, ideally, I probably would have put some beans in or something, a non-root vegetable. You don't really follow roots with roots, just for the soil health. But I really wanted some red onions. I did not have the foresight to plant them last spring, and so I wanted to get those and get a harvest before the fall. So I went ahead and put red onions back in this bed. I did amend it with some compost, which normally I wouldn't have amended it. I would have just planted right into it with a different crop like beans or something like that. But instead, I went with onions, so I amended, and I am already seeing them start to pop up. So we love to do pickled onions in the summer. It's really great, like fresh, quick pickle, and it's delicious. So we obviously needed to get some red onions in the garden. So these will be ready to harvest late summer, probably maybe early fall, maybe like September, maybe October, depending on what stage we want to harvest them. Because we pickle them, they don't have to, I'm not curing them, so they don't have to be full grown or anything like that. But I also planted some cucumbers and some melons on that trellis. So those should be popping up shortly. All right, so I want to talk about this asparagus. I don't know if you can see it, it's a little bright in the background. But this entire bed has sprouted, and it all looks really good. So with asparagus, the first 2 to 3 years, you let it go to seed. So I'm just gonna let this grow, let it go to seed, just let it do its thing, pretty much live untamed for a couple of years. You don't wanna harvest young asparagus because that'll prevent you from getting really great harvests in future years. So kind of holding off and letting it get established for 2 years is going to increase the amount that you're going to be able to get from it on year 3 and beyond. So I mean, people have asparagus patches that are years old, like 50, 60, 70 years old. So that's what I want here. So I'm going to be patient and just let it continue to do its thing. All right, so let's talk about garlic. Here is my garlic, but I'll just take a seat. So, this is my garlic. This could look like a bad thing, but actually all it means is that this garlic is ready to be harvested. So, when garlic, similar to onions, is ready to harvest, it falls over. This stem becomes squishy and kind of dies, and it falls over. So these threw their scapes a little bit ago. I did not harvest them. I actually can probably still harvest these and cook with them, but they've started to die and fall over. So usually your scapes throw, and then it's like a couple of weeks later they're ready to harvest. But mine happened around the same time this year. So I'm gonna go ahead and harvest it. They feel, I mean, these are really good sized garlic heads. They're really firm. So I don't think that I'm gonna have any problems with the garlic. I mean, they're all just really nice sized. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick those probably tomorrow. And then I'm gonna start them curing. So my onions are already curing back at the house. We picked those together. They should be ready, and it usually takes like 3 to 6 weeks depending on your kind of the climate and what it's like. If it's going to be dry outside, you can just kind of put them in a shaded area and let them cure outside. when I picked the onions, you guys remember, we were getting a ton of rain. That was a few weeks ago now, and now we're getting no rain. So I could pick these and let them cure just, you know, outside. I probably will do that, and I gotta stop myself now before I go ahead and just like pick all of these while I'm talking to you. But look how great these look. I'm really pleased with how big these heads turned out. That's wonderful. Ah, so exciting. I am so excited to have all of my garlic, and because I got this garlic in the ground early last year, I planted it in like September, which is about a month and a half before I normally would plant my garlic. It's ready to harvest and it's not even June. So that's great for a lot of reasons. I'm gonna actually be able to get 3 crops out of this bed. So as soon as I get these out, I'll top it off with a little bit of compost, and then I'll put something else in here. I'm thinking either eggplants or okra, some of those things I wanted to try. And then in the fall, I'm probably gonna rotate these a little to the middle row, and then in, you know, September, October, I'll go ahead and clear out. This bed will be done because these are brassicas, and I'll go ahead and put my new garlic in there. So it's kind of like the circle of life, and I'm gonna just continue row by row exchanging what's in there. So it's a simple crop rotation. I don't always follow crop rotation. I think it can become really intimidating, especially if you don't know exactly why you're doing what you're doing. It just can get really complicated, especially when you have a large garden. So some things I focus on trying to rotate. I usually just follow a couple simple rules of thumb, like don't follow a root with a root. And I mean, sometimes I don't follow that because I just put onions back in an onion bed. So you do you, figure out what you have room for. You'll figure out what works in your garden and what doesn't. It really is not, it's not like brain surgery. Gardening, anybody can do it. Anybody can learn to garden. Everybody makes mistakes gardening. Everybody is gonna have a great year for something and a bad year for something else. So much of it is outside of our control. So much of it is the weather and honestly, God. Like, are your seeds going to germinate? Are they not going to germinate? You can have all of the perfect everything and your seeds cannot germinate, and you have no control over that. So sometimes you got to just roll with it. Look at this herb bed. Here's my Tulsi, or my holy basil. It's looking really great. It's here next to my lavender, which I've got some lavender that looks really good there too. And some on the other side that's getting really big. My nasturtiums are just taking off. Those look wonderful. They're delicious too. If you've never eaten nasturtiums, they're spicy. They kind of have a horseradish type flavor, and their flowers are edible. So I think these ones have like a bright orange flower. And then that one, it was a new variety to me this year. These are an Alaskan nasturtium, and I think the other one might have yellow flowers. My sage, like look how big this has gotten in just a couple of weeks. Oh, it's so fragrant. So like my favorite thing with herbs is to come up and just kind of like rub your fingers through them and then smell your fingers. And it's just so fragrant and so delicious. And it works with like pretty much all herbs. Oh, the thyme is beautiful. Even your mint. I love it. So these have been really good. I've actually been picking a lot of this lavender and putting it in my water. That's one of my favorite ways to use herbs. What I will do throughout the season is pick a lot of the herbs and then dry them, and then we use those for our seasonings. So, you know, any Italian-based seasoning, you know, we're gonna dry our oregano, we're gonna dry some thyme and some basil, things like that, and put those all together. So, and rosemary, obviously. My rosemary is looking really nice. It's just my favorite. I don't know how you could walk through a garden that has like an herb garden or a cottage garden or something like that and not run your hands through the herbs. Like, I'm pretty sure you can't do that. It's not even possible. And then these are all looking really good too. I've had a ton of weed pressure already, which is driving me crazy. These beds are brand new, and we did put cardboard down. But anyways, this is dill. I think dill. Yeah, oh, definitely dill. These are dill. They're looking really good. This is that strawberry mint, which is just delicious. And then this is my parsley, which looks really good. It's an Italian parsley, and it came back. I didn't know if he was going to make it. He was super small and puny, but he's come back strong, and he looks really good. Okay, so I am super excited about this bed. So this bed has my artichokes. So I have 3, this one that you can't really see, and then I have one right there, and then one up front. I was not sure if they were gonna make it. They were looking really rough when I started them inside. I just wasn't sure if they were gonna make it, but they're looking wonderful. They've started to put off these really firm, nice green, dark green leaves, and they're just looking fantastic. So I am crossing my fingers that we get a great artichoke harvest and that these make it through the winter and they become a staple perennial here in my garden. I'm so excited. And look at the dahlias behind them. They've just taken off. So this bed is going to be gorgeous. It's going to have those really ornamental giant asparagus plants, and then it's going to be surrounded by those beautiful dahlias. So I cannot wait. I feel like this bed is going to be one of my favorite spaces in the garden. Okay, so I was just taking a look at these last 2 beds, and they have tomatoes in them. I've got some zinnias planted in the middle of this bed. I did this whole area in the middle as zinnias, which I felt like would be a really great kind of like ornamental, I guess, aspect to this bed, and it also helps it be a little bit easier. I don't have to worry about harvesting in the middle. Now the other 2 beds, I did put stuff I have to harvest in the middle, so I guess I'm just making it easy on myself in that one spot. But I was just noticing, like, look how huge all of these tomatoes are. I really have to get out here and prune them and like get them supported before they start falling over. Like, look at, this is just crazy. Look how big this plant is. It's huge. Now, I also love the smell of a tomato plant. It's a little bit different. You know, you don't eat the greenery on a tomato, but it smells like summer to me. So my tomatoes and my tomatillos look good. The tomatillos are there in the back. That all is just taken off. That bed is happy, happy, happy. Okay, friends, and moment of truth. Look at those sweet potatoes. So I was really, really not sure what was gonna happen with these sweet potatoes. Some of them died. I'd say like 30% just didn't make it and totally died. But the other 70% is really hanging on. Now, they're not taking off as quickly as I would have wanted them to. You know, at this point, I would expect them to already be crawling, and they're like recovering still. They're still just like trying to survive. But I think that they're gonna make it. So I don't know that I would say I would order these again. I might do my own slips next year, or get them locally, something like that. I think the shipping was just like too much pressure on these plants. But I think I'll get some sweet potatoes, which, hey, beggars can't be choosers. Okay, so coming over to this bed, this is that bed that I just wasn't sure about. I wasn't sure if it was gonna make it. It just, everything was looking a little bit sad, and it's looking wonderful now. My eggplant is not like super, super happy, but it's flowering and it looks like it's gonna be okay. So I'm hopeful. But for the most part, this is all looking really great. My tromboncino squash has popped up, as well as my Armenian long cucumbers. Those also popped up. So I'm really excited about that. They all look really good. So you can see those are the Armenian long cucumbers, and then those are the tromboncino squash right there, kind of popping up across the top. Doesn't look like my Kajari melons have popped up at all, but they still have some time. Now this bed has just taken off. Everything is starting to germinate. Across the side, I've got a bunch of different varieties of beans. You guys were with me when I planted all of that. And those are all starting to pop up. Also, I am super, super, super excited. This is my Malabar spinach. Oh, I'm so excited. I've got 3 that all germinated in the same spot. I'm gonna let them get a little bit bigger, and then I'm gonna separate them out. That'll climb, and that's a summer. So that's a summer spinach that we're gonna be able to eat on all summer. Most spinach likes the cooler weather. So as it starts to heat up, it bolts really quickly, and you just don't get spinach during the summer. But Malabar spinach is actually, I think it's an Asian variety, and it climbs, and the leaves are edible. They taste really similar to regular spinach. It's not actually related to spinach. But It's edible, it tastes like spinach, and it's called Malabar spinach, and I'm really excited to have it in my garden this year. I've also got these are radishes that I've got planted in here. They're starting to get big. That's a kale patch, followed by some different lettuce varieties. My carrots look really good. My leeks are starting to pop up, and then I also have some bunching onions across the back. So I want to talk about my brassica beds because they are getting really close. My cabbage is starting to head up, but we are, going into our second week with temperatures in like the high 80s, low 90s, which is just like super not ideal for brassicas. But we've had such a mild May that I got them in the ground a little bit late, but I really thought that we would get to the finish line. I'm crossing my fingers, we still do. I'm starting to see some more pests. All right, so I'm having some camera issues. My mic keeps falling off, but I am starting to get a little bit of pest pressure here. You can see on these cabbage leaves, they're starting to get eaten up. I need to get in here with some BT. I talked about that last time and I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but I'm really hoping that we have enough time here for these to finish up and for my broccoli and the cauliflower to head up and kind of get it together. There is not a ton to see here yet. None of my corn or my squash or my melons are really popping through. I've had a couple germinate. Some of my summer squash over here has started to pop up. So once those get moving, they move really quickly. So I'm not worried about it. I know that these will be covered really soon. And we do generally have a pretty mild fall. So even if they got a slow start and they're going to be, coming ripe towards September, that should be totally fine in our climate. And then my sunflowers across the back have not started germinating either. We both just ran over because Fury just started freaking out back in the field. Kevin's going to head down there and see what's going on. It's one of the harder things about living on a homestead and having so many things under your dominion, and so many animals. Okay, buddy, go ahead.
I can get my mac and cheese.
Sometimes things are not. Sometimes things are not quite how you want them to be, and it looks like Kevin's struggling. I'm gonna go help him. Okay, so we ran down here. So Fury, our livestock guardian dog, is just being super weird. He's barking. He's being really weird. So we might actually put him up for the night, just in case Jeannie is, in labor and he senses something happening. I mean, he's growling and barking at her, which is not normal. So I think we'd rather get him out of here, just in case. We don't want to risk, anything. All right, so it's always fun to end a garden tour with some farm excitement. I hope that this means we're really close to having a baby. And just like that, everybody's falling apart. The kids are hungry. The dog is freaking out. The cow might be having a baby. My camera broke. Or my mic, but such is the life. Well, before everything really starts to go downhill fast, I just wanted to thank you for joining me in the garden today. We're getting to that point in the season where the harvest is abundant and where the garden just becomes a place that not only do you give a lot, but that you receive so much. And it's not always your full baskets. That's not the only thing that you get from the garden. I find peace, I find comfort, I find joy here. And I hope you do too. Thank you for joining me today. You always have a space in my garden. Until next time.